with anger to dealing with hurt, because oftentimes one causes the other. So let's look in Genesis chapter 4, and it's 9 verses. We don't necessarily have to read 9 verses to get our answer, though. I think we all know this. Who was the first person to kill his brother in hot anger? Cain, that's right. Why? What's happening here? Why did Cain kill Abel? He was jealous. He was jealous of his brother. Now listen. Was Cain's jealousy justified? You know, sometimes we can feel slighted. We can get slighted. And we feel or we can justify our jealousy or our anger or being upset because something happened that should have never happened. And it is somebody's fault. But let's talk about Cain tonight just for a minute. Was his jealousy justified? Did Abel have any advantage over Cain when it came to the sacrifice given to the Lord? No. They both had the same training, right? They both had the same training. Now, he did have animals, so he had a blood sacrifice that he owned. Now, Cain would have had to go get an animal, but what I was trying to get at was they both had the same training. They both knew what God asked for. They both knew what God requested, and Cain decided, I'm going to do what I think is good enough. Is that not what we see around the world today? Hey, listen, God says this is the way folks should act, and they say, well, I can't do that, so I'll just do the best that I can. That doesn't work. Cain knew what God required. Cain knew what God expected. And he thought because he was really good at something else, it would be good enough. He was wrong. But when God accepted Abel's sacrifice and not Cain's, Cain was furious and he killed Abel. Anytime I hear someone talk about the sacrifice and Cain and Abel, I always remember at the fine arts that we take the kids to every year, used to, and didn't go last year and don't look like they're going this year. They would perform. Some would sing, some would play an instrument. Jimmy would make something out of wood. They had woodworking competitions. They had boys that would come and preach. They had preaching competitions. They had all these different things. They had debate teams where they would practice debating and see who would win. But there was a group, and I don't know where they were from, but I remember if you were going to sing a song or if you were going to play a song, it had to meet certain requirements. It had to be non-contemporary Christian music or a classical music. It had to be one or the other. Singing or playing. There was no in between. Well, there was a school in particular, and I don't think it was our school, I hope it wasn't our school, that had this song they were going to sing. And they could sing this song really well. It's a popular song, but it's not a non-contemporary Christian song. And it's not a classic. It was a contemporary Christian song. It was a newer song. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with the song, but you know what the rules are. And the folks that took this group said, we know we're going to be disqualified. We know it doesn't meet the requirements, but we feel it's so good, we're going to go sing it anyway and just do our best. Well, they went and sang, and it sounded nice, and they were disqualified. And some of the folks were proud that they did their best. They didn't care what anybody else thought. They just did what they thought they were good at. And you know, that reminds me of folks that think they can earn their way to heaven. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to be nice to everybody. I'm going to control my tongue like lessons 2 and 3 taught me to do. I'm going to control my mind like lesson 1 taught me to do. I'm going to deal with anger like lesson 4 is telling me to do. I'm going to do all these things right. And then when I get to heaven, nothing else matters because I did the best I could. Hey, listen, if you don't accept Jesus Christ's payment for your sin on the cross, if you don't put your faith and trust in Him and Him alone, there's no other way. You will go to the same hell that the atheist goes to that says there's no God. It's not about doing our best. It's about doing what God asks us to do. You know what? There's probably things that I think I could do better than what God's asked me to do. Now, not when He helps me and I do it through His power. He's perfect. But wait, if you would have told me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, hey, you're going to get up in front of people and teach and preach and do, I'd have said, you're crazy. I'm not getting up in front of anybody. Now, my job made me, and I kind of got used to it a little bit, and I got a little experience with it. I still don't enjoy being in front of people and speaking. But you know what? It's what God is asking me to do. And when He helps me, I do enjoy it. You can't be any happier or safer than when you're in the center of God's will, doing what He's asked you to do. Hey, listen, our church is never safer. We could never do any better than if we're in the center of God's will. That's why it's so important. That's why these lessons we're talking about biblical integrity is so important. We've kind of drawn the analogy and said we're painting a picture of Christ for others to see. That's our goal. And that's why we're talking about some of these things. All right, so 1 Samuel 18, 5 through 12. You probably know this one too without even looking it up. Who tried more than once to kill David in a jealous anger? Saul did, that's right. Let's look at these verses though. 1 Samuel 18. And the verses I want to look at is for the next question, 11 through 15. How did David behave himself as a target of unjust anger? Let's read 11 through 15. Does somebody want to read that for me? I know it's a few verses, but does somebody not mind? Nice and loud.
And Saul cast the javelin, for he said, I will smite David even to the wall with it. And David avoided out of his presence twice. And Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him and was departed from Saul. Therefore Saul removed him from him and made him his captain over 1,000, and he went out and came in before the people. And David behaved himself wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. Wherefore, when Saul saw that he behaved himself very wisely, he was afraid of him.
All right, so how did David behave himself? Wisely, right. Wisely in all ways, it says. Here's the verses that stuck out to me when I was doing this paper. Verse 12. Saul was afraid of David. Why? Because the Lord was with him. You got that? Now, let's look at verse 14. And David behaved himself wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. Why was the Lord with David? Because he behaved himself wisely in all ways. Now, when we learn how to behave ourselves in all ways, the Lord is with us. And when the Lord is with us, the enemy is afraid of us. Verse 15, wherefore when Saul saw that David behaved himself wisely, he was afraid of him. Why was he afraid of him when he saw David was behaving wisely? Because verse 12 says he was afraid of him because the Lord was with him. Saul knew that when David knew how to keep himself and be wise in all ways, that he wasn't just up against David. He was up against David and God. Hey, sometimes we face things ourselves because we don't know how to behave ourselves wisely in all ways. Do you think, how did Saul know the power that David had access to when he was behaving himself wisely and God was with him? Why would Saul fear that?
Had Saul experienced that when he was in God's will
Yes, that's part of it. But Saul experienced it another time with David. When was it? When he killed Goliath. That's exactly right. Saul remembers when they were facing Goliath. Saul was shaking in his boots along with all of his other soldiers. And David comes and says, hey, who's going to whip this giant? That's paraphrase. Who's going to make this giant shut his mouth that's making fun of our God? And Saul says, hey, if you're going to do this, you got to put on my armor. You got to take my sword. And it was way too big on David. He says, man, I can't do this. I've not tried none of tested any of these things. I can't wear it. I'm going to take the only thing that I know and that I've tested. And that's my sling and my God. He knew the power David had when God was with him and David was behaving wisely in all ways. Saul seen it. How do you think Saul would have compared himself to Goliath? You know, he said, well, if he can whip Goliath, he can whip me. Why would we say that? Because Saul was petrified of Goliath. So he knew the power David had access to because he'd seen him use it before. Let me ask you this. Does anyone have a clue of the power we can access? Have they seen us even scrape the surface by behaving ourselves wisely in all ways? Psalms chapter 6, our next verse here, number 4, verses 1 and 2. Has anybody got those two verses?
O Lord, rebuke me not in thy anger, neither chasten me in thy hot displeasure. Have mercy upon me, O Lord, for I am weak. O Lord, heal me, for my bones are vexed.
So did David desire mercy from the Lord when he was weak and vexed? Yes, he did. He did. And you know what? It's okay to ask mercy from the Lord when we're weak and when our soul is vexed. Next chapter, Psalm chapter 7, verse 11. With whom is the righteous God angry every day? Somebody read that verse for us. See if we can figure it out. So for that group of folks that's going around and saying God's just this big ball of love and never gets angry and he's never upset, it's not what that verse says. It says he's angry with the wicked every day. And you know what? If we're behaving wickedly, we're in that group. We don't want to have God angry at us. We don't want to have God having to chastise us or correct us because we don't know how to behave. Number 6. We're filling in the verses of Psalms 37, 8. I keep saying Psalms. I know it's Psalm. It just doesn't come out right, I guess. Psalm 37, 8. What's the first blank there? Cease from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not thyself in any wise to do evil. Hey, it's never right to do the wrong thing. It's never right to be wicked. It's never right to be evil. It's never right to exercise our wrath. Psalm 78. Verses 19 through 22. Someone want to read that?
Yea, they spake against God. They said, Can God furnish a table in the wilderness? Behold, he smote the rock, and the waters gushed out, and the streams overflowed. Can he give bread also? Can he provide flesh for his people? Therefore the Lord heard this, and was wroth. So a fire was kindled against Jacob, and anger also came up against Israel, because they believed not in God and trusted not in his salvation.
All right, so why was God angry with Israel as he provided for them? Because they failed to believe him and trust him. Now, what would make us any different than the Israelites? When we fail to trust God, hey, whether it's personally or corporately as a church. Did you hear that? When God asks this church to do something and we don't do it because we don't trust that He'll help us or that He'll take care of us or that we're going to end up without something, God doesn't like that. It says He gets angry. Now, we got to understand that God can be angry and sin not. He asks us to do that. We're supposed to be angry and sin not. So God doesn't sin against us or wait to strike us with a lightning bolt, but He gets angry when we don't take Him at His word. Why would He get so angry at us not trusting Him? What do you think? Why do you think that would make Him so angry?
It's not a good picture of the unsaved.
It's not a good picture to the unsaved, that's true. But essentially, what are we calling God? If He says, I'm going to take care of you, and you say, I don't think He can take care of me. What are we doing to God? You're calling Him a liar. That's exactly right. We call God a liar when we fail to trust that He'll take care of us. Hey, that's big. That's really big. And until we start looking at things the way God looks at things, we just say, well, that's not a big deal. That's just human nature. Hey, listen, what is our human nature? Sin. That's human nature. When we fail to trust God, we call Him a liar. Nick, you got any more of these? You want to grab one for Lakeland for me? I don't think you got one. Are they up here?
I've got one.
They're not up there. All right, number 8. Name 3 qualities of the Lord mentioned in Psalm 103, 8 and 9. Has anybody turned over there yet? Psalm 103, 8 and 9.
The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and plenteous in mercy. He will not always chide, neither will He keep His anger forever.
All right, so what's 3 qualities? There's more than 3, but name me off 3. Somebody give me one. Merciful. Gracious is one. One more. Slow to anger. Hey, if these are qualities that the Lord possesses, who are we supposed to be like? Him. So these are qualities that we should try to possess. Number 9, this is interesting. Proverbs 14:7. Somebody read that when they get there.
He that is soon angry, dealing foolishly, and a man of wicked device is hated.
Who dealeth foolishly? He that is soon to anger. What does that mean? He that is soon angry. What does that mean? Right, they can't control their temper. They get mad easy. They can't control. And it says if you can't control your temper, then we're going to be dealing foolishly. Proverbs 15:1. You might even know this one without looking it up if nobody's there yet. What kind of words stir up anger? Grievous words. Words that cause strife. They stir up anger. Number 11, Proverbs 15:18. Somebody want to read that one?
A wrathful man stirreth up strife, but he that is slow to anger appeaseth strife.
So, what is he that is slow to anger able to appease? Strife. So basically, you deal foolishly if you're soon angry. Grievous words will stir up anger. But if you are able to be slow to anger, you can appease strife. Next chapter. Proverbs 16, verse 32. We're going to fill in blanks here. Has everybody got the blanks so far? Do you need me to repeat any of them? We're going too fast? All right, Proverbs 16:32. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. If you can control your anger, the Bible says you're better than the man that controls a city. Number 13. Proverbs 19:11. We're filling in blanks on this one too. The discretion of a man deferreth his anger, and it is his glory to pass over a transgression. What's it mean to pass over a transgression? What do you think?
Choose not to do something bad.
Yeah, I'm going to look past the problem that we have. Whatever it is, I'm going to pass over the transgression. I'm not going to get angry. I'm not going to give you a hard time about it. I'm going to pass over that transgression. You're a happier person if you can do these things. Number 14. Proverbs 21:14. What is able to pacify anger? Somebody read that one for me.
A gift in secret pacifieth anger, and a reward in the bosom strong wrath.
Okay. So what is able to pacify anger? A gift in secret. Proverbs 21:19. I didn't write it, but we're going to read it. I'm getting looks from the back row.
It is better to dwell in the wilderness than with a contentious and angry woman.
It is better to dwell in the wilderness than with a contentious and angry woman. Quit looking at me. So I have a treehouse. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, listen, there's nothing, and I'm going to be serious with you for a minute. There's nothing that eats at a man more than to have his wife constantly angry and upset at him, even if it's his fault. Now, there are some things he can do to make things better, and there's some things he can do he ought to be doing to love her like Christ did. But if a man is always upset with his wife, it doesn't seem to affect her near as much as a man that his wife is constantly upset or angry with him. Why is that? Because that's the way God designed us. A man was built to protect and to take care of someone, and that if that person that he's always that God has given him to protect and take care of is always biting him or angry and upset with him, it eats at his spirit. It really does. Now, for a lady, you can. Most of the time, their need or their desire is for love and protection. You could be mad, just make sure I have what I need. But it seems to me like, at least in experiences and folks that I've dealt with, there are lots of times the guy is just wrong and hateful, and it doesn't seem to affect at least on the outside, the relationship as much as it does when it's the other way around. And there's more than one verse in the Bible that says it this way. It's something we have to need to pay attention to. Neither should be angry or grievous or contentious. But it seems to affect the guy a lot more when it happens to him, seemingly, than it does for a lady. Proverbs 22:24. And this may tie back to 21:19 as well. Should one make friendship with an angry man? No, he should not. Why? Somebody read that verse. It tells us why.
Make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not bear.
What's the next verse then? Maybe it's the next verse.
Lest thou learn his ways, and get a snare to thy soul.
There it is. Lest thou learn his ways. Lest thou learn his ways and get a snare to your soul. Number 17. You know, and I guess maybe the 21:19 might not have come out completely right. Let me rephrase it. Put it this way: the whole world can be against me, and if my wife is for me, I still want to fight. Does that make sense? But if the whole world is with me and my wife is against me, I'm ready to give up. And a lot of other guys, if they're honest, are going to say they feel the exact same way. There's some folks that they don't have two nickels to rub together, and you know what? They're perfectly happy because they love each other. He gets support from his wife. She gets the protection she needs from her husband, and nothing else matters. And there are people that have money to burn to keep warm, and they're miserable because they're contentious, and they don't get along, and they want to give up. So maybe I should have said it better that way. As long as I have the support of my wife, I feel like I can do anything. And I think most guys would probably agree. You know, I know some of you guys remember, maybe in our younger years, and maybe some of you still, you'd go out and play that basketball game hoping to catch the attention of your wife or your girlfriend that's watching. You'd be the one to go down the steep jump, or you'd be the one to try the trick to get their attention. But if they wasn't looking, ain't no way I'm going to do that. I'm going to hurt myself. So it's kind of that principle of the contentious and being hateful. And it does go. It is a two-way street. So Proverbs 25:23. Anybody got that one?
The north wind driveth away rain, so doth an angry countenance a backbiting tongue.
What does an angry countenance drive away? A backbiting tongue. And that next verse, 24. It's better to dwell in the corner of the housetop than with a brawling woman in a wide house. It's just something about contention in your home it's dangerous. It's poison. Number 18. Proverbs 29:22.
An angry man stirreth up strife, and a furious man aboundeth in transgression.
What does an angry man stir up? Strife. Sometimes folks are so miserable or angry, they actually enjoy stirring up strife. Have you ever known somebody like that? I used to work with a guy like that. If it was calm and peaceful, he'd find something to stir up just so people were up in arms about things. And you got to be careful surfing around Facebook, because there are people that will create pictures, articles, ads that have a tiny bit of truth in them, and then they expound to go crazy on it, and the sole purpose is to get people riled up. You'd have thought it would have been over when the election was over, but it never ends. It's always something that some people just keep bringing up just to keep folks angry and upset about things. And listen, that's not an accident. That's Satan's plan. If he can keep us angry at each other, we're never going to be right with each other. And if we're not right with each other, we're not right with God. That's his plan. Number 19. Ecclesiastes 7:9. Anybody got that one?
Be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools.
So we're filling in blanks. Be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger rests in the bosom of fools. Because anger is foolishness. Mark 3:5. Somebody got that one?
And when he had such a lamb that brought them with anger, being grieved for the hardness of their hearts, he said unto the men, Stretch forth thine hand, and he stretched it out, and his hand was restored whole as the other.
So why was Jesus angry and grieved with the Pharisees? Because their hearts were hard. Yeah, that's exactly right. So, what do you think could be one of, if not the biggest contributors to a hard heart? Has anybody got any ideas? Could be pride. Could be pride. Unforgiveness. And both of those, especially put together, leads to bitterness. And that's what I was thinking. Bitterness. Somebody's hurt us. We're not getting over it. We're not forgiving it. We let it cause us to be bitter. And the more we let ourselves fill with bitterness, the harder our hearts get. Pride will keep us from making bitterness right. Anger can start bitterness, but the consistency of our heart, whether it's hard towards God or whether it's soft towards God, a lot of times will correlate with the amount of bitterness we allow ourselves to play with. Does that make sense? Bitterness, someone once said bitterness is like me drinking poison, waiting for the person I'm upset with to die. Oftentimes when we're bitter about something, the person that we're upset with, they don't even realize it. They don't even think about it. It's not even a big deal to them. It's only us that it's causing a problem with. And if we're not careful, we can end up with a hard heart just like the Pharisees had. Number 21. John 2:13 through 17. This is a story I think we're fairly familiar with. Anybody got that one? I think about, 5 verses there?
And the Jews' Passover was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem, and found in the temple those that sold oxen and sheep and doves, and the changers of money sitting. And when he had made a scourge of small cords, he drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money, and overthrew the tables.
So who did Jesus drive out of the temple?
Money changers,
The changers of money, that's right. Why?
because he shouldn't have. The church should not be a place of business.
Well, and I've heard that said a lot, and to an extent, you're right. But folks that traveled from afar off had to have a means or a way to obtain their sacrifice. I don't believe it was uncommon for them to buy their dove or their ram or their sheep at or outside the temple so they could go in and sacrifice it. The problem was, these folks in particular were charging an exuberant price because they were the last stop. They had no other choices. They had the folks over a barrel, per se. You didn't have nowhere else you could buy one. So I can set my price at whatever I want to. Sound familiar? When everybody was running out of toilet paper months ago. And I honestly believe that Jesus was so upset because people were making money with God's money. Listen, I think that's very dangerous. Folks were paying they were buying these sacrifices and bought at a fair price. I don't believe there was anything wrong with that. Everybody didn't have sheep or whatever. You know, back then certain sins required the sacrifice of certain animals. What if you don't have one? You had to get one. So them providing a service at a reasonable fee, I don't know, was necessarily a problem. But trying to make as much money as you can just because you're able to, especially at the expense of God, is a dangerous place to be. And that's what these people were doing. And Jesus was upset. He run them out of the temple. He dumped their money out. He scattered them out of here and says, "Hey, this isn't a place of business. This isn't this shouldn't be going on here." And that's what upset Jesus so much, I believe, about this particular situation. So we have to be careful that we don't find ourselves caught up in this similar type of situation. The next one, what number are we on? 22. Ephesians 4:26. Filling in blanks here. You guys probably know this one already. Be ye angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath. What is such a big deal about waiting till morning? Now that's one thing. That's exactly right. You may not make it till morning. What else? What else could be a big deal about waiting till morning? Or waiting a day or a week or a month or whatever you're going to wait. Why is it important to do this immediately? What do you think?
Well, you're not going to get much sleep. You're going to stew all night long.
That's exactly right. And the more you stew on it, the worse it gets. I don't care what it is. If I'm upset with somebody, the more I think about it, the more I sleep about it, the more I dream about it, chances are I'm going to be madder in the morning than I was when I went to bed.
And your spouse is going to be angry also.
That's exactly right. Your spouse can be angry too. You didn't let her sleep last night. Listen, this thing of anger taking root and turning into a seed of bitterness is a big, big deal. Again, we got to look at these things from God's perspective and not our human thought or the thought process we've been taught over time. You know that old saying, sticks and stones break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Man, that's one of the biggest lies there was. Man, if Pat were to get up and fling a rock up here and hit me with it, it's probably going to hurt for a little bit. But that hurt's going to go away, and it may even be funny after a while. But man, if he gets up and says some hateful things from his heart, that's going to crush him. That will crush me way worse than if he hit me with something or threw something at me. And it also has the ability to become a seed of bitterness that can give us a hard heart towards God. And why didn't the Pharisees listen or trust or believe God? Because they had a hard heart. It's serious. It really is a serious thing. Number 23. Colossians 3:8. We're looking for 5 things a believer should put off. And it's not doing your chores, going on a diet, working out, your honey-do list.
For now ye also put all these things. evil, wrath, malice, frenzy, filthy communication out of their mouth.
So what are they we're supposed to put out of our mouth? What's one of them? Anger. What's another one? Wrath. What's another one? Malice. What's another one? Blasphemy. What's another one? Filthy communications. What's blasphemy?
Using the Lord as an excuse for something that you want to do.
It can be. Absolutely.
It's the use of the Holy Spirit.
Right? One of the things that he was upset with the children of Israel about was blasphemy when they didn't believe that he was able to do what he promised he would do. When we don't take God at his word and we doubt him, that's a form of blasphemy. Number 24. Filling in blanks here. I'm sure we know this one. Fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged. Absolutely. Now, that doesn't mean let your children run the house, but it says provoke them to anger. Causes discouragement. The last one, Titus 1:7. Who should not be soon angry? A bishop. That's right, a leader in the church, pastor. Should not be soon angry. Why? Why is that important? That's exactly right. Everybody looks to him. You should be able to anyway. And that's why I think it's so important. No matter what your position is in the church is. If you have any type of position in the church, folks look to you. Hey, if it's okay for the custodian to do this, then it's okay for me to do that. And when we look at things with God's perspective, the little things that we think aren't really a big deal, man, they can really lead to big problems. Does anybody have any questions or anything you want to add? Anybody got any blanks I need to go back and fill in for you? Any comments? What do you think of that one?
A lot of times people will say, okay, especially if you're in business, they'll use God. In other words, I'm a Christian, and they think that they're going to get good break right back. And